When I graduated from college, or actually like when I was in college, I started having this recurring dream that continued after I had graduated. It continued for years. I had this dream, and the dream was that I was in a class, I was taking a class, and there was a test, a quiz, an exam, and either I had forgotten about it, I was not prepared for it, or I just missed it. Like I got there late and just missed the test and failed it, obviously, of course. Got a 0 for oversleeping or whatever, for whatever reason that I missed it. And I didn't just have that one dream like one time. I have it over and over again. And when I graduated college, or after like going into the ministry, becoming a pastor, after a few years, that dream sort of morphed. It changed. That instead of dreaming that I missed an exam, I dreamed that I had missed church. Okay, when I was supposed to be there, it would be 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, noon Sunday, and I would be just like realizing I was supposed to be there at a certain time, like I'd just totally forgotten it was church. So I was driving to get there, and got there. Everyone would be leaving. The bishop was there, the district superintendent, and all these people. And I would just hope that Mark Jackson had bailed me out. I'm just hoping. All the staff's mad at me, but I'm like, did you? And that's my recurring nightmare. I don't know what yours is, but that has been mine. And I don't know if when you're in school, if your teacher would give pop quizzes. You had certain teachers that would give those. In college, they were pretty few and far between, thank goodness. But sometimes in high school, like if there's a senior skip day plan, we can talk about things like that now that all the youth are at Strength to Stand. We can talk about all that. And so like you're not just they would give pop quizzes on senior skip day just to make sure that you were there, or tell you might have a pop quiz or something like that if you didn't show up, and they wouldn't give one. They just really wanted you to be there. But a pop quiz is something that could happen at any moment, to test to see if you're really learning what is being covered in class. And I was the kind of student that I would, during class, take notes and write down whatever the teaching was saying, whatever they were writing up. It was formulas, mostly in studying engineering in college. And I wasn't like actually learning anything. I was just bored out of my mind. Usually my mind was somewhere else. Like I would just write it down so that when time came for the test, that's when I would sit down and actually try to learn to study the material to get ready for the exam. But with a pop quiz, you can't do that. You have to learn it as it goes. If you hear there might be a pop quiz, you better be prepared, because that test, that quiz, that exam could come at any moment. Well, when it comes to the tests of life, do you think that those big tests are more like scheduled exams or pop quizzes? Are there something that you know that are coming and prepare for them, or they could happen at any moment? They're more likely to be pop quizzes. You have an accident. You get sick. Okay, for some reason, all of a sudden, your circumstances change. You lose your job. It just happens out of the blue, a pop quiz. And everything changes in a moment. When I was in college, I guess part of the reason I started having those kind of dreams then was because that was the first time in my life that I was actually totally responsible for myself. In college, you're not like totally responsible. Depends upon what level of funding your parents are helping with. And mine would help with some, but not most of it. And when I was in high school, you can kind of count on your parents. Like if you oversleep, your parents or whoever it is that's responsible for you is going to come in and wake you up, tell you got to go to school today. The state will actually give you a ride. A bus will come to pick you up and take you to the school and take you back home for free. But college is not like that. College is kind of the first experience where you are responsible to get into class on time. No one's taking you there. No one's waking you up. You are responsible. Nobody else can bail you out for your lack of preparedness. That's the lesson that we're supposed to learn as we become responsible. We get to a place where we recognize that I can't count on someone else to take responsibility for my lack of preparedness. I'm responsible to be at church on time, to be at work on time, to preach whatever your work responsibility is. I'm responsible for it. That's an additional weight on your shoulders. But when it comes to managing our finances, when it comes to managing our money and being prepared for the future, while we might say that we agree with this, Most of us don't live that way. At least most Americans don't. We probably are a little above the average, here. But many of us, we don't take responsibility for our lack of preparedness. We're continuing in a series today. We're in the middle of a 3-part series on managing finances, on how to manage your money. Some of you showed up today and thinking, having a sermon series on money, I picked the wrong day to come to church. Some of you think, maybe I picked the right day to come. John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist Church, and he preached a sermon over 200 years ago, almost 300 years ago, and he had 3 main points for how to manage money. Very simple. And they are: gain all you can, save all you can, give all you can. And last week we talked about gain all you can, which, like many of you, maybe your personal favorite, like me. We wouldn't admit it, but that's one that's very, very popular. Gain all you can. You can check that one out on the podcast, the video if you missed it. But today, we move into part 2. Save all you can. And it may be surprising to you that the Bible has advice on managing your money. And it's not just a simple thing, you should give it all away and you should give, which that's what we'll talk about next week, and that's definitely important. Giving is very important. I'm talking about practical advice. Practical advice on how to manage your money. When I was I was 31, it's 12 years ago, 13 years ago now, 2007, took Financial Peace University, Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University. It was a life-changing thing for me. I was single at that time, and even though some people naturally lead toward being spenders and savers, that's one of the lessons there. Sometimes if you have a couple and one will more likely be a saver, one a spender, and they kind of balance each other out. That's at least that's the teaching. And I'm a saver, but even in that case, I was not prepared for the future. I just thought whatever you want, you just went out and bought. You want a house, you go out and pick out the house you want and buy it. You want a car, you want land, whatever you dream, you can have. That just was very naive. That was kind of what I thought. But then getting to about 30 years of age, you sort of and I was living in a church-owned parsonage at that time, and you start thinking about the future, and you realize that if I want to accomplish these goals or reach this place or have these things, I'd better make plans. I'd better be prepared to get to this particular place. And in the Bible, the book that has the most practical advice on managing your money, it's referenced a lot in Financial Peace University, is the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is filled with practical advice on how to live. And much of Proverbs, especially the first third of the book, is traditionally assigned to Solomon, the son of David, who was the king of Israel, is the author of Proverbs. But it's addressed such as a father speaking to his son, a father giving advice to his son. Son, you want to avoid this. Son, you want to avoid that. Do this, don't do that. And when it comes to finances, managing your finances, the father's advice to the son very much revolves around being prepared for the future, and don't expect someone else to bail you out of your lack of preparedness. Because the way that lack of preparedness is most often expressed, it was that case in Solomon's day, and it is the case in our day. That lack of preparedness is expressed by carrying something. Carrying something that actually works against saving. It's the opposite of saving. It is debt. Borrowing. Debt. Avoid debt at all costs. That's the advice. In Proverbs chapter 6, beginning in verse 1, here's what the father says. The father is giving advice in Proverbs. My son, Proverbs 6, beginning in verse 1, if you have put up security for your neighbor, in other words, if you have become responsible for your neighbor's debts, okay? You have done this, and of course, in that day, they made the arrangements a little bit differently. If you've shaken hands and pledged for a stranger, if you've made an oath with somebody that you've been taking responsibility for their debt, for something that really is not yours for whatever reason, perhaps to make money, whatever reason, you have gotten yourself into a trap. You have been trapped by what you said, ensnared by the words of your mouth. You've gotten yourself into a situation where you have obligations that you cannot meet. You have made yourself liable to someone else, and you are at their mercy. You do not want to be in that place. Or if you are there, you don't want to be there for long. Verse 3, so do this, my son, to free yourself, since you have fallen into your neighbor's hands. Go to the point of exhaustion. Give your neighbor no rest. You want to be out of that situation. You don't want to be legally liable for someone else's debts. You are at their mercy. Now, there's another proverb that tells us that, I believe it's Proverbs 22:6. It says that the borrower is slave to the lender. It actually says it even more explicitly. It says the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. And if you don't believe that when you borrow that you have become a slave to someone, you have never taken out a mortgage, okay? You have never done that. I've bought 2 houses in my life. Once in Prattville when I was past dead, and I moved here, and I bought a house we moved in, and it was like a whirlwind. A lot of things happened. And I've learned my lesson on that. Like, I tried to move in and close on the same day, okay? Because you don't close like in a brief amount of time. Like, we just go up there, sign some papers, and you have to wait on the bank to give you approval. You have to sign your life away. They want all your organs and everything. They really don't want, but it just, it takes forever. And it was so frustrating. I was walking away from that. I'm like, I'm never borrowing money again, ever. And of course, that hasn't proved to be the case. But I remember that when I walked into our house, this is in 2013, and was looking at houses to buy, and we were looking at buying the house we live in now. And I'm an engineer. I'm trained in things that would potentially be hazardous. And I thought, well, we have a creek very near our property, just behind our property. And I said, are we in a flood zone? And the guy who's selling us the house said, no, you're not. Actually, we've surveyed that. There's the line of where the 100-year floodplain is, cutting through your backyard. You're well away from the house. I said, great. And so I sit down at the close and said, well, you're going to have flood insurance because your property's in the floodplain. I'm like, our house is not in the floodplain. I've asked this question, and they said, no, the government says, the mortgage company says that part of your property is on the floodplain, so you have to pay flood insurance, which is like $300 a year. Now it's like $500 a year. And I was like, I know that I'm not in the floodplain. So I had to go this long process of FEMA, working with FEMA, hiring a surveyor, having it surveyed, proving getting a letter that could go back to the mortgage company to say that my house is not in the floodplain so I can get exempted from that flood insurance. The reason that I have to do that is because I am a slave. I'm a slave. I might say my name, but I really don't own my house, okay? Or I didn't at that point. Because it belongs to the bank. Whatever they say I gotta have it. Whether it's flood insurance, even though I know my house is not vulnerable to flooding. If you have ensnared yourself by being in debt to someone and you cannot pay, do everything you can to get out of that situation. And you want to do it as quickly as you can. Verse 4. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snail of the fowler. Some of y'all were here about 3 weeks ago. I preached a sermon on rest and stopping and enjoy the moment, in life. Just forget that, okay? No, you don't want to forget it. But if you're in, that's what he's saying. You want to get out of that situation. In some situations, it's going to involve like working more to pay off debt. In some cases, it will involve where creditors are coming after you and they're calling you. And there may be a case that you are going to your neighbor and you are making negotiations to try to make lower payments so they can write it off or whatever has happened to where you have gotten in that particular place. But whether it's credit card loans, whether it's debt of whatever kind, medical debt, car loans that are excessive, all of these things, get out of that situation. You are at the mercy of the one you owe money to. You are making up for your lack of preparedness. You are depending upon someone else's resources to bail you out because of your lack of preparedness, because you cannot pay for what you want with your own money, and so you're counting on someone else's. And it naturally puts you at a disadvantage. And so here's what you do, says the father to the son. Like a good daddy who says, don't do that, son, that's stupid. Aren't you glad that daddies just speak that frankly to you? I mean, sometimes you need that. And that's one thing like Dave Ramsey was to me, taking that fight. Don't do that, that's stupid. Okay? Here's where you look. Verse 6. Look at the ant. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Go to the ant. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. It's diligent. It works in seasons of abundance to be prepared for seasons of leanness. And it doesn't have to be told to do so. It doesn't have to be motivated by some commander. It is naturally wired within that ant to store up and to prepare for the lean times. So this is what you should do. This is the example for us. We could sum up what the author is saying here is that prepare for the future by storing up today. Prepare for what you will need in the future by storing up today. In other words, save all you can. Save all you can. And borrowing, not only is it not saving, it is the opposite of saving. When you save, you are withholding today for something that could happen tomorrow, storing up for what could take place tomorrow. When you're borrowing, you're taking from tomorrow to pay for what you want or need today. It's the exact opposite. Borrowing works against saving. When I was shortly after I graduated college, it was actually before I was taking the Dave Ramsey class. I had a friend who had taken that class and was giving me, saying about how it had changed their life, and they had moved into a smaller house as a result of all this. And I mean, it just totally, they just took it hook, line, and sinker. And I heard like they had done this really freakish thing, like just totally freakish. I didn't know this people actually did this kind of thing, but they had paid cash for a car. I mean, they really had done that. I talked to other people. I was like, friends were like, have you heard this? I mean, what kind of freaks? Who? They paid cash for a car. I mean, you can actually do that, you know? I didn't think it just thought, and then after I heard that, I actually went out and borrowed to buy a car, borrowed more than I thought that I could haven't always made the wisest decision, probably like most of us. I mean, that's one of Dave Ramsey's things, you make stupid decisions for money just because you're alive, because we all have done that. But if there's one thing that you could borrow for, that if you borrow, you want to borrow for something that's guaranteed to go up in value, okay? And like today in our environment, like a home, real estate, it's a pretty safe bet, not guaranteed. It's the best bet of something that's going to go up in value. So you're borrowing for something. You're borrowing from tomorrow, but what you buy today will maybe be worth more tomorrow, most likely. But if you borrow to buy a car, when you drive off the lot, you have lost money. You are paying more for that car so that you can have it now. You are paying more for it by borrowing from it, because all the saving that you could be doing tomorrow, you won't be able to do because you're paying for what you bought years ago that's already worth less than what you bought it for. Credit card debt, don't even say about all of these different things. You save, you prepare for the future. Now, some will say you can't know everything that's going to happen in the future, and that is true. But there are some things that you know will happen if Jesus doesn't come back. I mean, Christmas will be December 25th this year, last time I checked. It is coming. You can count on that. I don't know how many of you want to retire. I mean, if you want to work the rest of your life until you keel over and die. But most of us probably here want to retire and make plans for retirement. And here's the truth. You think about like debt. You think about how much we pay in loan payments. Can you imagine how much you could save if you didn't have those payments? If you didn't have loan payments? If you didn't have a car payment? If you didn't have a credit card payment? You didn't have to pay off that furniture? You didn't have to keep paying for that vacation? If you didn't have that mortgage payment, how much could you save if you didn't have payments? Because the truth is, and I've shared this, I was actually researching this week, and I was afraid this number might be higher, but I'm grateful it's like only this, but this is still millions and millions of people. 25% of Americans have saved nothing for retirement. That's millions of people. Now, they are mostly younger. Like if you were to weight it down, the higher percentage of those who are younger. But that's really kind of sad because those who have really the power to leverage saving for in the most powerful way are those who are younger. The power of compound interest, all these things. I'm not going to go into all this today, but the power of saving, to take advantage of that. It's sad, especially if you're young and haven't started saving. So why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we save? Is it because we're expecting someone else to bail us out of our lack of preparation for the future? Or could it be because we are addicted to living above our means? Because we're living above what we're making. We're borrowing. We're not only not saving, we're going under because we're having a lifestyle that is above what we can pay for. Maybe it's because we look around and we see that house that they live in, or that car that they drive, or that vacation they got to take. Why can't I have that? And what we don't know is that probably they're living above their means too. But here's where this comes into play. Why this is so important. And the critical piece to all of this. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. Godliness with contentment is great gain. It's so easy for somebody else to tell you, you need to buy a new car. I mean, you driving that old thing? Or you need a bigger house. Look how big your family's getting. Or you need to get some new clothes. You know, people probably think that about me for a year. You know, you need to go out and buy this, buy that. It's so easy for somebody else to tell you that because they don't have to pay for it. You are responsible for it. You are the one who has to pay for it. And because the principle to saving, it's very simple. Here is how you save. You save when you live below your means. When you spend less than you make. It's very simple. And the reason why all of us, or you can't save, or you're not able to save more, is because you're spending more than you're making. It's just it's a sad reality. Well, I wish I made more. Well, I wish we all did, you know. And it's easy for me to say live below your means, okay? It's easy for me to say that because it is challenging. We live in prosperous times, but there are challenging times. I mean, healthcare costs are obscene. They are obscene. And they have skyrocketed in not so much the last couple of years, but like in those years in before that. Healthcare costs. And while we live in prosperity, profits are going up, wages are not necessarily going up. At least at that rate, the profits are going up. And groceries and diapers and providing for a family, those costs go up. Just this past week, Molly comes home from Walmart. I just don't know how the cost of groceries is going up. How did the bill at the end we check out is just so much more than I thought it would be going through. And Molly's very careful to look at how the cost of living goes up. And so it's not easy. But it's also not impossible. And one thing you discovered, or I discovered, is that when you start saving, and not just saving for retirement, but saving for purchases. Like you're going to, instead of borrowing from tomorrow to have what you want today, but instead to save up today so that you can not borrow and pay for what you need. But it's so hard when we start saving and that starts building up. It's just hard for not to burn a hole in our pocket. We just want to go out. What am I? And you save for this goal, this thing you're going to buy, and you see something else, or you see this bigger house that I want to have, or I could have what you could have all of a sudden, could be like it becomes more possible because you've saved, and we're not wise in the way that we spend it. You don't have to buy that thing. You don't have to live in that bigger house. You don't have to buy that brand new car just because that you can. Because saving is possible when you live below your means, and not only does it allow you to save more, but it allows you to give more. The reason that you can't give more is because you're spending more. It's because the lifestyle is what the way that you're living is you're living higher, closer to what your means are. You're not able to save or give as much. So saving is good. But it's not all about hoarding for yourself, okay? We're going to talk more about that next week. It's not about just hoarding for yourself, to save up to build a nest egg for you or even to pass on to your kids, although all of that is important. We bring into perspective that all that we have is God's, that God has entrusted His wealth to us, and that we are stewards of what He has, and we will be held responsible to what He has given to us. But shouldn't your finances and the way that you manage it reflect your priorities? What you spend on? Shouldn't they reflect what's important to you? We're going to have some opportunities here at Mulder in the next few weeks for you to get better at that. It's something we can all improve at, okay? And I went through this 12 years ago, Financial Peace University. It changed my life. Okay, I was single at that time and was able to start making some changes to prepare for becoming a father later in life, which has advantages and disadvantages. Okay, 39 when my oldest son was born. Financial Peace University, and I've taught this, and I've had people in their 80s to go through Financial Peace and to love it and get something out of it. Okay, at any stage of life, it's 9 weeks. It used to be 12 weeks. It's shortened to 9 weeks. It's going to begin February 12th. One of many different merge groups. They're going to be starting up. And if you haven't taken this, you can get something out of this. And I highly recommend, but practical advice from a Christian and biblical perspective. And then a week from this Wednesday, Charles Wheeler is going to be speaking this Wednesday night, but a week from this Wednesday, on the 29th, Terry Turner from the Alabama West Florida United Methodist Foundation. They have so much money they have for churches. People give to the foundation. They use to support ministry. She's going to be here, and she's going to be talking about this very issue. It's kind of going to take it to the next step. And she's like, especially if you have younger people, to come to this event. This is on Wednesday the 29th at 6 p.m., because she's going to talk about the power of saving and investing for the future. Jesus told a parable in Matthew chapter 25 that about being prepared. And it was a parable that there was 10 bridesmaids. And in that day and time, the bridesmaids didn't march up to the altar for a service. They waited at the home of the bride for the bridegroom to come and to get her and to take her to their new home. And that was the process. That was how they were married. And so the bridesmaids, they have a procession, and they would wait for the bridegroom to come, who would come whenever he had prepared his house, and it was ready for the bride and the bridegroom together. And they never knew when he would come. And so they stood outside. If it was at nighttime, they would stand outside with lamps to make a pathway for the bridegroom. But Jesus tells this parable, and there are 10 bridesmaids, and 5 have brought plenty of oil, and 5 have only brought a little bit of oil. Well, the bridegroom is delayed. It takes him longer to get there than they had planned or expected. And as a result, the 5 who didn't bring enough oil, their lamps are about to go out. And they turn to the 5 who have plenty of oil and say, "We're running out of oil. We need to borrow some of yours." And the ones who have plenty say, which is one of the coldest statements in the Bible, they said, "No, because then we might not have enough. Go back into town and get some oil for yourself and come back. Don't ask us to bail you out of your lack of preparedness." And so those 5 who didn't have enough go back into town, and while they are gone, the bridegroom comes, and he says that they go inside and he shuts the door and they get back. And where you see that this is talking more than just about like weddings and processions, it says they knock on the door and the bridegroom says, I don't know who you are. And they miss the party. And the lesson for this is to be prepared. To be prepared. Because life is like a pop quiz. And eternity is like a pop quiz. And when the day of the test comes, you don't want to be found unprepared. You don't want to be on the outside expecting and hoping that someone else will bail you out of your lack of preparedness. That because you didn't do what you needed to do when you had the chance to do it, that someone else is going to bail you out. You can't count on that, Jesus says. But here's the good news. As far as I can tell, everyone in this room is still breathing. As far as I can tell, you are still alive. It's not too late. It's not too late to be prepared. To be prepared for life. To let your spending priorities represent your values, your stated priorities, your confessed priorities and beliefs. And it's not too late to be ready for eternity. Because the good news is that even when we're not prepared, and we haven't saved, and we haven't done what we should have done, there is one who did everything that he should do, and that we should have done, and he is there to rescue us if we call out to him. So would you do that? Would you do that today? Instead of counting on somebody else to take responsibility for what you are responsible for, to take responsibility for yourself and to be prepared.